This is part 2 of a 2-part podcast.
Hey, this is T. Blankenship. Have you seen the new video of Wheaton Labs? It is permaculture awesomeness with all new and improved things like more rocket mass heaters, easy bake coffin, Willy Wonka, rocket cooktop 2.0, and the truly passive greenhouse. To see more, go to permies.com/tour. Again, that is permies.com/tour.
Yep. I recently read your book, Building a Better World in Your Backyard Instead of Being Angry at Bad Guys.
Thank you for reading that.
Love the title, love the book. Insightful but easy read, so I highly recommend it to the audience. It was particularly refreshing to hear you highlight the underappreciated importance of not blaming the bad guy, but instead doing what you actually can to make your own dent, to fix things, make things better, move in the right direction. I've gotten a lot of comments on multiple videos that basically it seems like their solution to some of the, like I built a thing to solve a problem, and their solution is if you voted for the right politician, you wouldn't have had the problem in the first place. So if you kind of had to, if you had to pick between casting your vote in an intelligent way or picking up a shovel, what do you think is the more direct path toward a good future?
Picking up the shovel. Notice the zero hesitation.
Zero. I think that one was answered before I was done asking.
It's a rigged playing field out there, and I'm an engineer. Politicians are not engineers, and they're trying to navigate a quagmire, and their motivations might change as the weeks change, and some are more noble than others, and it's like, but the bottom line is, and I don't know, I said this into a podcast or something like 15 years ago, and somebody made it into a meme, and it's such a silly looking meme. But I said, politics is a circus made dominantly of scary clowns whose primary function is to distract you from what's really going on. And I think that so many people are like, you got to write and vote and you got to do all these things and you participate in the system. And I feel like it's a rigged playing field. But I've seen good people work hard in the face of politics and actually make a difference. I'm not that person. Years ago, there used to be a thing called a newspaper. I don't know if anybody remembers this.
Never heard of it.
I'm just that old. And it apparently I would read it the wrong way. So what I've learned over the years is that you're supposed to open it up and read something and be angry. And you're supposed to say, they need to do something about that. And I read it the wrong way. What am I going to do to fix that? That is stressful stuff. I mean, about 20 years ago, I stopped reading newspapers and news because it's an infinite game. But the idea of what will I do? I mean, I at the age of 20, I worked as a lowly librarian at the Northwest Power Planning Council. So these are the people that decide whether we're going to build another hydro plant or another nuclear plant or another coal plant. And these people were cool. They really cared. And I'm just a lowly librarian, so I got to see all the documentation coming in, and I had to figure out how to file it and keep track of it and stuff like that so I could find it again. But I learned so much. The joke around the office was conservation. We'll just ask people to use less power. And they did. About half of the money that they ever spent on putting material into magazines and stuff was trying to convince the general public of different ways that they could save energy, which ended up making no difference. And so, but I foolishly thought that is the true path, because all forms of generating electricity are an environmental nightmare. Some are a horribler nightmare than others. But oh wow, like so many people I've heard, I keep hearing people refer to hydro as clean and environmentally friendly. It's not. It is horrible. I don't want to go down and talk about all the horribles and like hold a ruler up to how horrible each one is. Conservation truly is the solution. It has haunted me all of my adult life. And another thing is before I went to work for the Northwest Power Planning Council, like when I was 18, I spent my life backpacking in the Wallowa Mountains. I loved it there. And I lived off of foraging and fishing while I was up there. I brought a little cheese with me, too.
You can forage for cheese.
But, and then it was when I was 18 that somebody told me about how fish have mercury in them from pollution. And so you got to be careful what fish to eat so you don't get the mercury. And I'm thinking like, ha, 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 I have thwarted your system by wandering into the high mountains. And the only water that goes into these lakes and creeks that I fish is coming from the snow I can see. The watershed is so tiny and it's way up in the wilderness. So therefore, those fish have no mercury. And then these people would then be like, you are a foolish idiot. Because what happens is we have these coal-fired power plants. And then they put mercury up into the atmosphere. And then it comes down everywhere equally, including in your pristine wilderness lakes. Therefore, those fish are full of mercury also. They've poisoned your fish, dipshit. All right, so that was the beginning of this whole... And the Northwest Power Planning Council, conservation, and it's kind of like, why don't they tell more people about, like, clotheslines and drying racks? I mean, those save a lot of energy. Now, of course, the rocket mass heater. And when people talk about smoke, it's like, okay, let's talk about every speck of particulate that comes out of a rocket mass heater in order to heat your home. Let's talk about that. But what do you heat your home with? Electricity? Let's talk about, and here in Montana, I believe we've recently gone from 50% coal power to, I think it's 42% coal power. So we're still doing coal. How much particulate is coming out of those coal plants, and what's all the different kinds of ugly coming out of that? But then it's like we can also explore all the ugly of all the other ways too that Montana currently has for energy. But let's say you're doing natural gas. That's even worse. And so many people are like, let's go all electric. Let's go with heat pumps. And it's like, if somebody's an advocate for a heat pump, it's almost impossible to talk to them, because they'll it's cheap to install. Mini splits are cheap to install. And it's like, and it uses 70% less energy. And by 70%, I'm talking about in-ground heat pumps, which are, of course, triple the price of the mini splits, right? We just talked about. And it's like, still running electricity, still burning that coal. So, there's so many ways to save energy, and it's like we don't have to get to zero, but can we start with maybe a 40% reduction while simultaneously making your life more luxuriant? Now, you read my book. Awesome. Thank you very much. I think everything in that book has zero sacrifice. Each item I talk about in that book adds luxury and or coin to your pocket. So nothing, there's no sacrifice. Do you think that's a fair statement?
That's fair, yeah.
Okay. So,
and it's empowering. It gets you to want to take action rather than sit back and social media post about how bad everyone is. I think that's a powerful thing, and it's a way of building community, instead of tearing it down. And speaking of community, here at Wheaton Labs, I think of this, the term that comes to my mind is intentional community. Is that the term that you would choose, or is there a different term you would like to use for Wheaton Labs?
I recently read a book called Sun House, and in that book they talked about intentional community, and they said, but all intentional communities fail. Instead, let's call what we're doing a menagerie.
So it won't fail.
Right, so it won't fail. I would have to say that yeah, it's kind of an intentional community, but there's a little bit of an issue. 95% of intentional communities fail. And so I believe we need a new recipe for community. My guess is that you have not read my book, Permaculture Thorns.
No, I honestly didn't know it was out yet. I've heard you talk about it, but I didn't realize it was
It's out in shitty draft form.
Oh, okay. I've not read it. Yeah. I've heard you talk about it. Sounds interesting.
For all the people that come here, I get asked about Permaculture Thorns more than all the other things combined.
People love drama.
And the function of Permaculture Thorns is, how do you turn the drama from 11 down to like 0.5? Because that's the drama is what is the poison on intentional community. And it's like, okay, so we got to have less drama. How do we go about doing that?
Right.
And that's what I wrote in Permaculture Thorns.
What are the ground rules or bylaws within your community that kind of help keep it together? Is there a set of rules, or is it more of just kind of a gestalt?
I would have to say that, we've got, we might have some rules, like for this particular property, I say no tobacco, no drugs. So that's a rule. But I think most of it is more like guidelines that we've come up with over the years. But at the core of it all, the way that we make decisions, so like most intentional communities are going to be consensus-based. And we have what we call the independent thought consensus dictator hybrid. And so if you're about to do a thing and no one's going to give a shit, go ahead. If you're about to do a thing and you think someone might give a shit, you could talk to that person or bring it up to the group. Problem with consensus is that it could take years to make a decision with consensus. So you give it a shot. If it starts to take a while, you bring it up to the dictator. And in fact, on Permies.com, like about 3 days ago, somebody referred to me as a tinpot dictator.
I don't understand the tinpot part. What does that mean?
See, I didn't either.
Yeah.
And so I had to look it up. What does that mean, a tinpot dictator? And Google came back and described it. And I should look it up and read it.
Is it like ruler of a small domain, basically?
Right. It said, I wish I could remember all of the words. Yeah. I can't. We don't have any internet here, so I can't look it up.
No, I can't. My battery's almost dead, too. Jeez, we really are off the grid, aren't we?
We're super off grid. And so basically it said something about being a tyrant, and I said, that sounds kind of cool. and it said something about I can't remember the word, but I said that makes me sound slimmer. And something about being small. Petty. And I thought, I like being petty. That's my favorite thing. And so, I don't know, I had a list of stuff, and it's like, so then I changed my signature to say I'm a tinpot dictator.
So on the spectrum of benevolent dictator to absolute consensus, it sounds like you see the benefit in more of the dictator role. Is that a fair summary?
Well, you can never say benevolent dictator.
Okay.
I like tinpot dictator.
Okay.
Why? Well, if you say benevolent dictator, then what'll happen is that somebody will want something. And then they'll say, if you don't do what I want, then you're not benevolent. I hereby revoke.
You're malevolent now.
Exactly. And so I've always kind of said I'm an evil dictator, but evil is relative and subjective. So I think that the people that are here have decided that I must not be that evil, or else they wouldn't be here with their presence. But I kind of get the idea that, sure, there's going to be people that like study my stuff or listen to my podcasts or whatever, and they're going to say that I mean, they're not going to make it 2 minutes in, and they're going to be like, that guy's horrible. I'm glad we worked that out. So you're not coming out here, and that's okay. I do like the idea of creating. Well, not creating. I like the idea that someday there will be 100,000 communities in the United States that follow these models we're attempting to put together, and then people can find a match for themselves. And so out of 100,000, surely there's got to be at least a few dozen matches, and each will have, and then they'll project what their thing is through podcasts or videos or whatever.
And let the good ideas take hold,
Yeah, or what is a good idea will be relative and subjective.
Right.
And so, it might be a little bit like the politics where the people are pointing at each other and screaming how, they're bad and whatever. And it's like, so some places will allow smoking and drugs, and some people will be like, that's for me. And some people, I know that the people who come here are generally like, I'm so glad that there's no smoking or drugs here.
Is there a single story behind that, or more also a gestalt kind of thing?
Boy, you do want to dig, don't you? Once upon a time, I was a little boy, and my little boydom was weird. I got to live with multiple families for reasons. I got to see alcohol abuse and drug abuse and a lot of smoking, which I just never liked it. But basically, from my little boy days, I came to the conclusion of I don't want to ever do drugs. And so I don't know. I feel strongly about it.
That's fair.
And but I'm a weirdo. And it's like, but there's some people like me that want nothing to do with it, and so they're like drawn to it as well, like drawn to the idea of no drugs, because right now it's so a part of our society right now. There's so much of it, and I think a lot of I don't really know, but I'm going to speculate that a lot of people just want to escape, like the path that they're on, they just need to escape, and drugs is a way of escape. But I've seen dramatic side effects. And so just want to be away from it.
That's fair.
There you go.
I pondered unplugging from the rat race, to be frank, 10 years ago, a little more than lately. But it's probably because now I'm a father. And really there are two things that kind of keep me stuck or planted in the city, however you want to word it. But one of them is family and being near them. And it's not just my kids, but it's, grandparents and them being near my kids. So being near family is one. And then two is the opportunity cost of not investing in the assets of my own property and home. And I mean, if I had to guess, I would assume I could extrapolate that to a lot of other people, that something like this winds up falling apart for their own journey because they're concerned about those two things. Are there any particular ways that you address them here within the community?
Well, there is so when I lived on Mount Spokane, I had a neighbor who owned 2 homesteads. He lived on one, and he sold the other one at least 3 times. I know that sounds really weird, but hear me out. When you go to buy a homestead, banks usually won't touch it. So if you're going to get a mortgage, it's usually owner financed. So this guy was like, all right. So he did it. So usually you pay a third down, and then you pay an interest rate that's like maybe slightly higher than the best interest rate you could get in town. So he would sell this second homestead to a couple, say, and then they would continue to do a worky job in Spokane. And now they had a longer commute. And they were going to do homesteading on the evenings and weekends. And it's dreamy. It's a great thing to do, and the property was very cool. It had lots of really cool features, and so, but what would happen is they would get exhausted. They're trying to do it all, and they would walk away, and ownership would revert back to this old dude, and then he'd sell it again. And when I left that area, he had sold it 3 times. So I don't know if he sold it more than 3, but the moral of the story is a lot of people dream of homesteading, but the only way they can make it work in their mind, with their limited understanding, is if they take on a mortgage and they continue working their worky job and commute this really long distance. And they generally end up burning themselves out. And now, like what? Did they lose $150,000? And they're back in the city living in an apartment. That's an expensive thing. So that would mean that they had $150,000, and now they don't. So I've tried to make something here that would work for me back when I was younger, but also I want it for those people, so they could show up here and do stuff and be part of what we're doing and things like that, but they don't need the worky job. And they can keep their $150,000. I mean, if they want to give me a slice of it and get their own acre here, we can work that out. We've got a program for that. But if nothing else, how about this? Why don't you just come out here for 3 months? Quit your worky job. Come out here for 3 months. Just rent a cabin for 3 months. Try it out. I mean, the worst that's going to happen is you're out of 3 months of rent. Now, I think the big thing is find out if this is really for you. But more than that, I want to encourage people to get into to our Gardening Gardeners program, which is basically the boot camp, and try that out instead. Because when you go and do some gardening, you're elbow to elbow with several other people. And when you go do natural building, you're elbow to elbow with several other people. And everything is easier because you're doing it with several other people. And on top of that, when you're on your own, you're out $150,000. Plus, you got to kind of figure it all out on your own. And everything depends on you. Everything. Which is a soul-draining thing, to have everything depending on you. And you're trying to do all this stuff, and there's just not enough time. But if you're in the boot camp, there's infinite time. And rather than operating from a place of scarcity, you operate from a place of abundance. And it's soul feeding. And then you get to share a table every 3 meals a day with other people that are trying to figure out the same stuff. And the information exchange is profound.
Put Paul's brain on your plot. Do you have a hunk of land but don't know where to start? Do you have a world-changing permaculture idea and you need some feedback? Do you feel like the guy in overalls may inexplicably hold the keys to all your wildest permaculture and homesteading dreams? Well, you're probably wrong. But if you want to give it a go anyway, you can hire Paul for a consultation. He will be all yours for a whole entire hour. Schedule your Paulversation today at Permies.com/consult. Permies.com/consult.
I've heard you describe with the boot camp that rather than kind of learn if someone is a good fit for the community here, you prefer to kind of build in good habits into an applicant to kind of ensure they become a good fit over time. Can you expand a little bit more on the details of the boot camp process?
I love the idea that there might be somebody who is, say, 18 years old, and they don't like who they've become. And so they come here to be somebody else. And then they grow gardens, and they harvest from those gardens and eat that food year-round. And they build natural buildings, and they do all these things that we do here. And they talk to people and visit with people, and I think that they do become somebody else. So part of me is like, oh yes, I love the idea of perfect people coming and being perfect for the boot camp and raising the boot camp up to be new levels of amazing perfection. But I think that that's going to be pretty rare. I also like the idea of people showing up and they're trying to transition out of the rat race, transition out of normal, and trying this on for size and giving it a chance. We'll see how it goes. Does that answer your question?
No, it's fair. I think it gives a rough picture of the type of applicant you're looking for. And I think the boot camp process, I think, is somewhat self-explanatory in that you're basically teaching the skills of what it would be like to do well here. And so it's kind of a self-test. The applicant can come forward, decide if this is their thing or not, and then if not, they can leave, you know.
We call it a shitty school.
We're selling it.
Yeah. Well, I think the pace is really easy, especially the first 2 weeks. Stephen will suggest that you take 5 a lot. And we've had some people in their 60s come and do it for a few months. So I think it's really easy. We don't crack the whip or push or anything like that. Instead, I think what happens is that after a month, people start to do more in a day because, to satisfy themselves. It gets, because anything else would be just too slow. They got more they want to do, and they can now. And then when they get into the third month, they accomplish twice as much in a day as they did after 1 month. And it's like because they're getting better and better and better at this, and they're really kind of finding their groove and getting a lot done. So when you're here for the first week, most people, our expectations of productivity are very low, but it's not about productivity. It's about being a shitty school. And so, in time, you're going to grow your own food and build your own home. And in the meantime, you're going to eat the food that was grown by the boots from the before times, and you're going to stay in the bunk that was built by the boots of the before times. And so, and you're going to be growing and building things for the people of the future that you haven't met yet. And maybe you'll decide to go do something else. Maybe you'll decide to stick around for 20 years.
That's interesting, because it kind of guarantees that even if the applicant doesn't want to stay, some good was done. They learned a thing, they did a thing, the future will benefit from the thing. The world just got a little bit better, even if they don't want to be a long-term member of the intentional community.
Look around this building. I mean, everything you see in here was created by either people at workshops or people that were in the boot camp.
Yeah, that's pretty incredible, because none of this looks easy,
It is easy. It just takes a while.
Yeah. I heard in a talk with some other intentional community leaders a couple weeks back, I think, I heard you were kind of lightheartedly chuckling that you have some practices that a lot of them probably don't. And you mentioned exit interviews. And I was like, oh, man, there's got to be some stories there. So has there been a theme of any sort when you do exit interviews? How does that go?
So in 2005, I went and I visited a whole bunch of intentional communities, and I did exit interviews. So people that were leaving the community, I wanted to hear their story. Why are you leaving? And yes, I heard so many stories, so many things. But I think, and then on top of that, there have been a lot of people that have come here that came from a different community. And we've even had some people that were currently living in another community, but they were kind of like touring other communities to kind of learn other approaches. And those people, I like to think those people are very charmed by how we do things here. But yeah, the number one reason people left other communities is the drama. They arrive with stars in their eyes and like, I found my home. This is where I'm going to live forever. This is what I've always dreamed of. This is the best. And then in less than 2 years, I need to get out of here. I'm just so sick of the drama. And so we're back to like, how do you turn the drama knob down? So I did all those exit interviews. At the same time, I studied a lot with Diana Leaf Christian and some others that were experts in community, trying to understand how do you build community with less drama. And I brought up Central Leader, and it was always shot down. I remember I was sitting in on a 3-day workshop about intentional community, and the instructor was going around asking everybody about experiences, and I tried to mention like, oh, I've got these websites that are online communities, meaning Permies.com was one. And it's like, so I feel like there's similarities. No, there's not. Now, 21 years later, yes, there are. And so I did the exit interviews. I did not know then what I know now. I learned so much, and I really felt for these people that were leaving because they loved the idea of community. But this is too hard. And it seems like community should be easy. In fact, and this is kind of like one of the things I've talked about is like when we all went to college, or those of us that did go to college, some of us lived in a shared house or something. There'd be 4 or 5 nutty youngsters living in a shared house. And I would say 90% of the time it didn't work. That motherfucker didn't wash his dishes again.
That was me.
Okay. You bastard.
I know. I'm so sorry.
But at the same time, there are about 10% of those situations that totally worked. Mm-hmm. However it worked. And they were besties for 4 years through all of college, and they helped each other through college, and everything in the house was always silky smooth, and there was never an argument about dishes, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So it's like, what do they have? What is different there? What is the recipe for that? How do we duplicate that? How do we get that to work?
Have you found any answers?
Well, Permaculture Thorns has it's and so basically the thing I'm saying in Permaculture Thorns is I don't have the answers. I have a lot of stories to tell, experiences, things that happened, things that I observed firsthand, and I want to write it all down. And I want to talk about what I want to try to do and why, because we need a better recipe for community. The current recipes suck. And we need something that has less drama.
Yeah.
And there are some things to look to where there's a whole bunch of people all living under one roof without stabbing each other. And they seem to be getting along. It's not perfect. But boy, it's a lot less drama than what we're seeing in intentional communities. But first we got to, have something that's rock solid. And I think we're close. I think we're doing pretty good. But it is very different. Yeah. Now, earlier we were talking about people spending a whole lot of money to get into homesteading, to make the leap. And I proposed something much less expensive. But part of that is the magic of community. And so I kind of feel like if you're going to do homesteading solo, it's going to be very challenging. And if you try to do homesteading solo, but I'm going to become besties with all my neighbors, that could work. It could also blow up in your face. There's other challenges that might be a little too overwhelming to overcome. But with community, it could, in theory, be much easier. But, of course, the community designs are not doing so good. There are communities out there that are growing and expanding and are great and they're big. Not many in the United States, but in Europe there's Damenhur and Findhorn. Those two are quite large. I've studied Damenhur more than Findhorn. Anyway, I would like to come up with a new recipe, have it work, put it into a book, and then someday there would be 100,000 similar communities. I wish for this. It might be silly. I do think that of all of permaculture, solving the community problem is 90% of the challenge of permaculture. So like greening deserts is easy compared to solving the community challenge.
Yeah. People always complicate things. I mean, every homestead eventually comes to an end, and that can be the opportunity for a new beginning. With that in mind, what is the SKIP program?
Well, okay. SKIP is currently 1,477 homesteading projects that people can do and have verified. And I would say that 85% of them just want to do the projects to have them verified. And the reason why the whole SKIP program was created had to do with how there are elderly people who would love to will their land to somebody worthy. And we got into the whole thing like, well, what does that mean? How do you measure worthy? And so we came up with the list. But I'd say 85% of the people don't care about those elderly people with homesteads. They have different motivations. So 15% or so do care about those elderly people. So by the time I started talking to Mike Ehler about how he was looking for somebody to will his land to, I'd probably talked to 36 different old people who had land and they were trying to foist it off onto me or to name somebody worthy. Why didn't they talk to me before I bought land? I don't know. But my friend Mike was calling me every month, and each month he would just say it louder, thinking that would help to fix the problem. And he needed the name of somebody worthy. And I said, well, you've had over 100 interns. Surely one of them. No. Wow. Not even one. Now, when I've talked about SKIP at events and stuff, then especially with community people, then they immediately suggest that the problem is not those 100 people, but the problem is Mike. And that might be true. However, I've heard the stories from Mike, and I can validate some of those stories. But no, I think you can go through 100 interns or 100 plus interns, and 0 of them are going to make the cut. And so a big part of SKIP is, what if we were to take those 100 people and put them through SKIP? I think all 100 could end up being a fit for Mike. They would then be worthy, and they could prove to Mike that they're worthy. So, but when they're showing up at Mike's house without SKIP existing, then they have expectations that Mike is going to teach them, like there'll be actual classroom time. Like Mike's going to stop and have a class of one student, and he's going to get a chalkboard and teach them stuff. And Mike's like, yeah, I'm not doing that. At the same time, Mike thought that they would have a little more gumption than what they showed up with, and that they'd have a little bit more skill when they arrived, or a little bit more give a shit. And Mike was perpetually disappointed, and the intern was perpetually disappointed, and so the intern ended up going down the road. And there was more than 100 of them. And
so SKIP either trained you to have the skills that make you worthy, or it kind of weeds you out if you're not interested in attaining the skills. Is that a fair summary of?
I think that's a pretty good way of putting it. Yeah. But it's like, so for example, we've had some people complete PEP 2 recently, and they have like 300 projects complete. And so those are 300 projects that they did, and somebody verified that they did indeed do it. And so if Mike were still alive, he could go and look and see the 300 projects, see pictures of it, and see them doing it in action and all the things. And then he could contact a person that he thought was worthy and say, hey, how about it?
Connect him to someone who's passing things on.
Yeah. So Mike would contact them directly and start the process of like, let's get this happening. And so, but that would, I mean, if it was one of his past interns, they've now gone through a bunch of stuff and they've probably learned a bunch of things. But they did it on their own. You know, they didn't have somebody holding their hand while they did it. Right. They did it solo. They took their own pictures. They took their own videos. They carved their own stuff. They did all the things themselves, all on their lonesome. Yeah. And they can show it all to Mike. And so, whereas before Mike said that, you know, he got to the point where he was telling some of his incoming interns that he'd be willing to will his land to somebody if it worked out. And most of those people said, will it to me now, or I'm not going to drive over. And Mike's like, I'm not going to do that. I don't know if you're a stupid fuck or if you're like worthy. Right. And so, fine, don't come.
Right. Kind of in the vein of knowledge transfer, I mean, we live in odd times. A lot of things are changing real fast. Is there particular advice you would give to the youth as changes in monetary system, college education, all these things coming on board all at the same time? Is there any big chunk or summary of advice you give to young people out there listening to this?
So I think we recorded something fairly recently where there were 4 engineers, me being one of the 4. And the question was, should a young person go to college? And all 4 of us agreed, not at this time. I thought Alan Bucker made a really good point. He said it was very reliable that in the days of yore that you could go get a 4-year degree in, say, engineering. And you'd be guaranteed a good paying job and you could pay back any student loans you might have. And then your pay would gradually get increased and someday you can retire. But things are different now. So, and people are like, is AI going to take your job? Not exactly. No. Is AI going to make it so that that company that had 100 engineers can now do 10 times more work with half as many engineers? Yeah. So they let go 50 engineers. So now there's 50 engineers in the market that have the same college degree that you're looking to get. But those people have like 10 or 15 years of experience in addition to that, and they're competing with you for those jobs. So you'll go to college for 4 years and you won't be able to get a job. I think that that's already starting. So I think people are coming out of college right now. And there's, not only is there nothing, but it's worse than nothing. They're meeting all these people that have 10 or more years of experience in the same degree, and they can't get a job either. It has started. Then people are kind of like, okay, go into the trades. Become a plumber or an electrician. And it's like, all right, well, when the bots come out with the AI and they have the knowledge of the 100 best plumbers plus the 100 best electricians and the 100 best of everything. Plus, there's, I don't know, 1 million of those bots out there doing these jobs. They're learning, therefore, at 1 million times the pace of what a human being can learn, because there's 1 million of them all learning. And because they're awake all day and night doing this stuff, they're learning even faster than that. So I think that if you go to a 2-year degree for some kind of trade, I think that the same thing is going to happen here by the time you get out. The bots will be out, and you're not competing against the bots. You're competing against a very experienced person who has 2 bots, or, there may have been a crew of 20, and now there's a crew of 5 plus bots. And it's and there's a lot of other people that have experience that you don't have that are looking for those jobs. And there aren't any. My advice is hunker down. A humble home and a large garden. I mean, I would think that in the next year, a lot of people are going to realize this. And our shitty school is going to be full very quickly. All the cabins will be rented. We'll be full up here in every way possible. But I don't know. I think it's going to be possibly like the Depression, but of course completely different.
Right, a high-tech version.
If you can get a free ride to college, go. I mean, if your parents are going to pay for it, or you got a scholarship, go. College is great. College is fun. But I wouldn't want to take on debt. I think right now is a great time to accumulate money whichever way you can. And then shoot for the humble home and the large garden.
Sounds like wise advice. 100 years from now, what will you hope your legacy on this earth will have become?
Oh, wow. What do I hope it will have become? Man. I hope that there will be hundreds of thousands of communities doing the Gardening Gardeners program. My legacy, I don't know. I don't really think about that. I hope that people will be keen on rocket mass heaters. I'm sure I'll be long forgotten, but that I've always hoped that by this time I'll have been forgotten about rocket mass heaters, and then the stuff that'll be coming out about rocket mass heaters will be super cool and way better than what I'm doing now. I guess I'm not looking for legacy. I like the idea that the ideas have been proven to be good. I like the idea that the Wofati will be proven and amazing. I like the idea that the backyard food pump will be everywhere, and that people won't be hungry. I had a lot of bits from my childhood when I was a little boy being really hungry, really, really hungry. I like the idea that little boy is like that today, or in 100 years from now, won't feel that. I mean, that's brutal stuff. When you're a little kid and you're so hungry, and nobody seems to give a shit because they got food. You're not my problem. I remember being so hungry and then living in a scroungy little place. And some church, I don't even know what church, brought over 2 boxes of food. I don't know what church that was. I don't know who, but the church brought over food. That was just huge. I mean, I was just a kid. I just started eating. I just was like jumping at the food. So, but in hindsight, now that I'm all an old man and everything, it's kind of like, I kind of wish I knew which branch of church was that. I remember it was a, standard issue guy who brought it over. Some guy. So, I don't, could be any church. So, thank you, church, from when I was a little boy and so hungry, for bringing over real food, just staples. I remember Bisquick. I learned how to make stuff with Bisquick, which, by the way, you could take Bisquick and mix it with water and fry it up in a pan, just like that, and that'll give you something.
Yeah.
And so Bisquick's cool stuff.
Well, hopefully, if more of your ideas spread around more and take hold, there'll be less hungry little boys out there.
I hope so.
Well, Mr. Wheaton, thank you so much for inviting me to your beautiful community. Thank you for talking with me. Truly been an honor of my life. So thank you.
Wow, you make me sound so cool.
Hey, I built your thing, Obviously, I took you seriously.
Yours looks so nice. I mean, I think yours, the rocket mass heater you built, looks almost exactly the same as this one.
It looks strikingly similar, yes.
Yeah.
So,
in fact, when we built this, Ernie and Erica built this.
Is it in the book?
This is the one that's in their book.
I bet you I just copied this. I was like, I'll just do that. So, yeah, I think I'm a mirror image. My leg goes that way, but yeah.
And so I had to say 100 times, no frills of any kind.
Yeah.
Because if you do some kind of really beautiful cob art, there will be fools out there that'll say, I cannot build a rocket mass heater because I don't know how to sculpt a frog.
Right. Yep.
Well,
thanks to you, I did it. No frog.
Yours looks just like this.
Yep.
It's like it's a nice and simple rocket mass heater.
Yep.
And I'm glad you built it. I'm glad you videoed it as you built it. So many people have learned now thanks to you.
Oh, just a conduit.
Finally, it's happening. So I just hope that you infected brains well enough that people will start to do it.
Me too. But your idea, so thank you.
Thank you, Kit.
I'd like to leave you with a quote from Paul Wheaton's book, Building a Better World in Your Backyard. It seems our human nature is that once we have sorted out there is a problem, we think we need to get the people who caused the problem to stop causing the problem, if that makes sense. Of course, it turns out that the problem is about 1,000 times more complicated than we originally thought. Nearly all these massive problems are caused indirectly by us, by you. And when we get angry at them, it turns out we paid them to create the problem. And there were almost always alternatives, but we voted with our wallets for the bigger environmental disaster, usually due to clever marketing. The problem is ourselves. We need to own our own shit. We need to clean our own backyard and stop feeding the monsters that are, in turn, harming and even killing our friends and families. If we stop giving money to the monsters, they stop being monsters.
Hi, this is Mark. There are a lot of reasons to get angry these days, but I prefer to focus on the positive things that we each can do to make this world a better place. The book Building a Better World in Your Backyard, Instead of Being Angry at Bad Guys, is a great resource for just that. Instead of throwing my arms up in frustration at governments or big corporations, there's a list of ideas that we each can tackle to affect change. Information about this book and other resources can be found at Permies.com.